In this RH Jam, we examine how our concept of time is shaping our sense of happiness and freedom. And there are ways that we can step beyond this perception of time, and we're going to talk about them because today's very special guests are Dr. Rubert Spera, founder of the Reconnection and discoverer of Reconnective Healing, and Jillian Fleer, head of insights and development for the Reconnection. And together, they have inspired a new age for Reconnective Healing practitioners and everyone who benefits from interacting with these healing frequencies. And one of these things that we're setting upside down on its head is our relationship with time itself. Coming up right here on the RH Jam. And welcome back. And my name is Anna Clavel. And if this is your first time here at the RH Jam, it is a weekly program that we talk about things that are really important to you, topics that are timely, pardon the pun, and that are deep and require and are requesting and begging that we explore them a little bit more. Yes, it is about everything and anything reconnective healing, but it is also about growth and expansion and understanding of who we are as human beings, as beings on this planet, and perhaps in multiple universes out there. And it's also an exploration of our relationship and interaction with the reconnected healing frequencies. And we will be expanding in 2020 with even more programs and offerings. So if you don't want to miss out on what's coming down the line for you, I suggest you subscribe to this channel. Yes, subscribe, like this video, follow us, share with your friends, and really important as well, let me know what kind of programs you would like to see. And if you would like to participate in one as well. I love chatting with people, as you know. And some people have mentioned that maybe I just keep on talking a little bit too long sometimes. But that's okay. It's all good because that's how, we develop a relationship. You get to know me and I get to know you. A little, right? In frequencies, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about this topic of time and timelessness. All right, so can we overcome the illusion of time? Einstein's Dreams is a book by Alan Lightman that I read many, many years ago. And I really would like to bring it up in this conversation about time because we know how perhaps those of us who like quantum physics who are into the physics world, or even peripherally, because it's so pervasive, the whole concept of relativity. Relativity is about time being relative to our perception. That's what he based that amazing formula he came up with about how time, space, and the speed of light interacts. Gravity interacts with us and our point of view in a universe, observing everything else. And this amazing great book by Alan Lightman talks about something very specific. It talks about how, and of course it's a work of fiction. It is inspired by Einstein's life. It talks a little bit about how is it that when we are happy, and I know we've all experienced this, time just flies like this little great clock that keeps going and going and going and going. And then sometimes we find ourselves that time just comes to trickle, to molasses speed, particularly when we are bored, and very especially when we are grieving. When we're in that pain of a grieving, time seems to stop. And in this really amazing book, and I have a link at the bottom, this is just like a personal recommendation. Alan, he goes over these themes of time and our perception of time as if it was Einstein's own discovery at the time that he was inspired to talk about time in this way. Now, time is something, as Culture Club will say, that in our society won't give us time. It seems that we're always racing against this little clock. Yet in Reconnective Healing, we quickly discover that time is indeed illusory. It is totally based in our experience of time and our perception of it. And one of the things that well, the main thing that inspired today's RH Jam, and I'm going to let Eric and Jillian talk about this. So Jillian got inspired, just like Einstein did that moment that he realized how relative time is in itself. And she said, I don't know, she just came up with, you're already there. Your perception is just joining you. And although she was referring specifically about our relationship with timelessness, that to define ourselves that we are timelessness, that whatever it is that we think we are lacking or looking for, it already is. It really also inspired in me to think about it from the point of view of time and how we sometimes have time be the one that dictates how and when we get from A to be, how we traverse space, whichever way we want to see that. So, without further ado, let's introduce Dr. Eric Pearl and Jillian Fleer. Welcome, Eric and Jillian. How are you?
Hi, Anna.
We're so good and happy to be here on the RH Jam.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always great to have you here. And this is the first time, though, that the two of you appear at the same time. So, guys, this is a treat. This is the first time on the jam.
That's only because usually when we walk back to back, so you can only see one of us at a time.
Well, thank you for the dad joke. We needed that. Thank you. Thank you. And, you know, as we know, the subject today was inspired by a beautiful quote phrase that Jillian shared with us. And actually, we have shared it with the world via our emails this week. And the quote is this: you are already there. Your perception is just joining you. Not joining, joining you. And it struck me as being such a beautiful observation about many things, of course, but of our relationship with time itself. But tell me, what was the inspiration for that phrase?
I think we've been really exploring awareness from the perspective of the Reconnective Healing intelligence. And, you know, we are able to look at the themes of awareness from a lot of perspectives, our thinking awareness, field, collective consciousness. Rubert Spera, who we love, talks about the state of awareness, a pre-experiential exchange. And I think in addition to that, we're really becoming aware that depending on where we are, and we've been talking a lot about scalar quantum physics, just the scales of awareness really give us access to experience very different levels of what we see, what we understand. And so we know we're already there. We know that the human experience is something that in some ways is a bit illusionary. We know that there's no such thing as time. Time is a man-made concept. We're really aware of that. But for so long, we've been experiencing these changes in our awareness through what we'll call dimensions.
Which is quite different than dementia.
Sometimes you feel like you have dementia.
Sometimes you don't.
But we've been, and maybe you can explain a little bit, the idea of being in different dimensions in and of itself is inaccurate in the quantum model of quantum mechanics.
It's an artificial
separation,
limitation, separation, a boxing or a blocking off, a segmenting of what is really one full flow. And interestingly enough, we speak about that we are awareness, but really it's a logical understanding when we spin off of what science has been doing, which science does so well, which is catch up with the truth of the reality that many people have already grasped. That, a lot of people, as Joe Dispenza will say, wait for science to validate something, which sort of creates or positions science as a false religion, and forgetting that everything exists before science finds it, or science wouldn't have anything to find, as we've talked about many times. But, we speak about resonance and vibration and consciousness, and really all of that is leading into that awareness. We speak about how we used to think that physical matter created the vibration, and the resonance, instead of recognizing what science does today, is that physical matter is a manifestation of the consciousness, of the vibration, and therefore ultimately all being awareness. When we speak of multidimensional, we are really speaking of more than one dimension, which then separates and segments dimension. But when we look at this view from that of a scalar perspective, you can sort of, let's use the word scale, your way up to a better understanding. For example, if you were an ant, you would have a different perspective than an elephant. You would not see things the same way. If you were a subatomic molecule, you'd have a less of a perspective than an ant, and yet a closer one. So it's not necessarily a lesser one, it's different, and less than a human or an elephant, or as we talk about before, as Rubert Spera. I like Rubert Sheldrake, he's a friend. As Rubert Spera speaks about the concept or the consciousness of watching a movie from a distance, and then you can get a little closer in the theater and maybe see a little better, but if you continue to get closer and closer and closer, you get so close to the screen that everything becomes fuzzy, and then eventually all you see is, as you like to explain, about the screen.
So the idea of we're already there, our perception is just joining us, is really maybe a new level of transparency for us to look at as we go about our daily lives. If we aren't so attached to just getting to the next future destination or the next thought or the next activity or the next lifetime, often it's just the next lifetime, right? Then perhaps we are able to be in the recognition of not just the idea of presence or the present moment. I mean, the masters of every origin, religious and spiritual, bring us consistently back to the idea of presence. But when we remove the concept of time and we are really just in the awareness of awareness, then that concept really changes in terms of how we understand it.
So what is us, is awareness. What is coming about is our recognition of awareness. So we are there, and the second half of your phrase is, we're already there.
Yes, and our perception is joining us. So right. So the choice to perceive is also integral, because what we perceive becomes our known experience. And I think when we incorporate the idea that we're presently everywhere, we are presence by our very nature. That is the nature of what we are. We are not an individual body that exists in space and is recognized as this individual mass or structure. That's, again, just the perception of how we move about in our thinking mind internally. So if cognitively, we can recognize, and scientifically speaking, that indeed we're here. We're here, there's nowhere to go. That's why I always ask our students, tell me, how do you walk towards yourself? This is such a funny little trick question that gets you really thinking, because if in fact you're already there, you really can't walk towards yourself, right? But your perception of where you are can join you where you already are. And I think that's an integral part for us. It is certainly the mechanics of how the Reconnective Healing intelligence provides an awareness of its presence, its interaction with us. The energy, light, and information seeks us only in that space that we already are, not even where our perception lives outside of that. So that kind of brings us to a better, I think, and deeper understanding of the Reconnective Healing frequencies, so that perhaps as we explore that interaction, cognitively we are allowing, and I think that's a beautiful word that Eric is always bringing to our attention, we are allowing our perception to join us. Not that we're going anywhere. We're allowing it to return to where we already are.
So, and you know what's so timely about this discussion, particularly now?
Timely.
But particularly now during the holiday season.
Yes.
Because everyone loves Christmas presents.
I had to come in that one.
We love that.
So, talking about the perception and using the image of scale, going from the and to the different perception and the higher perception, and understanding that, well, the way that it just, I can imagine that as a visual is like here you are standing in a room around you and you think this is the limits of a house, not knowing that there's a house around it, and around that house there's a city. And then above you are more rooms, and below you are more rooms. But here you are, and you're focused just on what you see in front of you. What do you feel are some of the factors that keep us bound in this perception, and not only of our space, our relationship to our reality, but in specific of, for example, time? What do you think are factors that play a key role there?
Oh, I think it's really deep. Well, our memories are all rooted in time. The only reason you have a memory is because there is some component in the cognitive understanding of every experience that you have placed in either the past or the future.
And as Nassim Haramein would actually say, without memory, there is no time, because there's no concept or recognition of time.
So we need to recognize that once we have time, or we'll call memory, space-time, however you want to look at it, the emotion or the feeling or the placement of that recall creates the entire, oftentimes known reality of how we define who we are. It creates an identity. The identity creates a biology. The biology creates an endless loop. We Joe Dispenza and many others talk about this. We become part of this endless loop as a mechanism of time that becomes highly obedient. And we end up, just like we feel all the time, we end up being the servant to the 24-hour day. And in that, the perception of the lifetime and the life that we live in the construct of that man-made existence in time is quite limited. Much more limited than once we are able to seek the perception beyond that, which can join us in a much freer way, a much more expanded way in our present awareness, where we really exist, and it's perceptible.
Right. And speaking about freer, actually, as I'm thinking about this right now, not to play with the word now when we're talking about time, but the concept of time is really also stress producing. Mm-hmm. Ever notice how, for example, when you're standing in line for a movie or a show or a concert, and it's a long line, and you start thinking about how long it will take until you get up to the front of it. Now, the line doesn't have to move at all, but a party of 6 people get in line behind you, and suddenly you feel better. You haven't stepped forward an inch, but you're no longer last in line thinking about timing. Or we're on the road, and oftentimes we're trying to get somewhere, and there are lots of cars and lots of traffic, and we focus on how long it may take us, and we start building up concepts of stress instead of sitting back and recognizing, hey, we're comfortable, we're relaxed, we have music if we want, and we can simply be in the present space of where we are now, because we're going to be somewhere later, just as we were somewhere earlier. And as we relax into that, stress disappears, because the concept of time disappears for us.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And the other thing is that there's the choice. I find myself that I'm racing against the clock all the time too. And then there are the moments in which I am able, and 100%, thanks to Reconnective Healing, I am able to step away from that and still observe it, allow it to happen if it needs to happen. Some things do have to happen in sequential time because they're deadlines. But step away from it as well, and then either choose to be stress-free, like you say, understanding that this is just illusory, or play the part and allow them to get in, hone in, and just scramble to just get things done. That's such a great point to make about what is our role in how we observe time and how it affects us. See,
and even here we view it linearly. We think of, if it's going to take us more time, we're more stressed. If it'll take us less time, we're less stressed. And yet, that's still because we're in that time perspective. However, as you mentioned with Reconnective Healing, in that space of the timeless, sometimes a 30-minute session feels like 5 minutes. And sometimes it feels like 3 hours. And either way, it's always a feeling of release and peace and timeless enjoyment.
Yeah.
This is absolutely the core of the experience, the timelessness, as somebody who has been receiving as the healing client and also facilitating that timelessness that occurs, the here and now. Tell me, would you like to share like a personal experience of that timelessness?
We have a great one.
Well, I don't know which one you're thinking of.
Well, we have one that happened not that long ago. We were in Los Angeles, and we had.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Go ahead.
Well, it was more like a time jump, and it took us. We didn't really intentionally create it, and I think both are possible. Again, let us understand that we have the capacity very much to perceive the timeless. As you pointed out on it, it's a choice. So we happened to be on the road, and we were needing to get from sort of the Studio City area, which is one part of Los Angeles, to the further into the Valley area, the Woodland Hills area, and somehow we pulled out onto the boulevard heading in that direction. We were in the middle of what I will say was a fully frequency infused conversation, but in that moment with tremendous congestion, somehow outside of time space, we had already moved multiple city blocks, lights into the area that we were needing to be, so much so that we actually passed where we were supposed to get off.
And it normally would have taken about how long? Traverse that distance would have been 12, 15 minutes,
right,
give or take. And it was in a minute or so, but not my experience, not Jillian's experience. Our experience of this.
Yes.
And yet other things were happening along that ride as well, but it was an interesting time frame because later on that weekend we met with a friend who shared a different kind of a time experience that went on that she'd experienced. She and a friend were both shopping in a certain area. They walked up and down a street that we knew very well, so they were describing it, and they talked about going into a shoe store. They walked into the shoe store, or a store carried many different things. Something about the counter looked strange to them. They didn't know what. They looked around. They found a pair of shoes that looked interesting. Did they want to try it? Did not want to try it? They tried one on. They thought about it. They left. Should we go back and get it? No, it's too much money. They thought about it. Then they decided to go back and get that pair of shoes. They went back. Well, how long? Next day? The store wasn't there. Now, this wasn't one of them having this experience of time and space warp. or dimensional warp or scalar warp, they both shared the same experience. They both had a conversation about whether they wanted to spend the money on the shoes, or the other one was going to lend the money for the shoes. So they both had that same experience and went back, and the store not only wasn't there, it never had been there, nor the woman that they talked to or anyone else. And they were both in equal shock over this.
And so, again, where are we in our perception of time and space? The other person who I love, Reza Aslan writes God, the Human Experience. And he really chronicles a huge piece of when the concept of time as our organizational body, as the governing rule of every aspect of our lives, from how long it takes for a human to form in the womb, and 9 months, and the cycles of everything. But pre that understanding, what was the human experience? What was our perception of everything? What was life in presence without the governing body of time itself? And what I find very interesting about it is that it has required time itself, in many ways, has been required to form what we'll call civilization. The progress of the human experience, and in that meaning the cognitive functioning mind. So something in the thinking awareness aspect of our embodied soul, humanness, for the brain to continue to perceive, invent, expand what we won't call here now, because here now would be presence, but in order for it to create growth, expansion, it had some component that required the timeline to become instrumental to our perceived understanding of everything, existence
and
itself.
Perceived is the important word,
yes.
Because what allows this to become very real for us is a general consensus of perception of how we perceive this to be. And as more people perceive it, we create stronger perceptive building blocks, creating a reality of something that yet, when we move to a new level of awareness, that reality that we constructed so carefully disappears as we allow that, sometimes for us, one person at a time, then 3 at a time, then more. As science will talk about certain things and theorize it, it becomes difficult sometimes for some aspects of science to catch up with other aspects of science, because even scientific fact becomes general consensus.
So who are we in the collective? Who are we as oneness? What are we as a collection of consciousness, where in some ways everyone's contributing, but what we lose is the separation of the identity of, Albert Einstein contributed this, Eric Pearl contributed that, Anna Clavel contributed this. What happens when that aspect of time collapses and we find ourselves in presence, and our perception of oneness, that fused awareness that we're actually sharing all the time? What does humanity look like from that perspective?
Well, I believe it begins to appear actually more ego-free, because in that awareness, we no longer feel the need to say, Anna Clavel contributed this, Jillian Fleer, Eric Pearl, Albert Einstein contributed this, that, or the other. Instead, it becomes part of a general, simple awareness. And in awareness, we all become one. And I believe that's part of what allows for our consciousness of ego to begin to dissipate, disappear.
Or expand. We can even say expand
Or
into something more.
expand to the point, right, or expand to the point where it too is no longer separating or positioning.
I know on a very tangible level that, for instance, when I go skiing, there is no cell phone. Often it could be very remote if I'm in Utah, specifically, where there isn't a large collection of people. I know that I experience often in certain spaces like surfing and skiing, timelessness. There's no reference of any kind to anything other than a complete fusion with the atmosphere. I'm aware that I'm moving. I'm aware that there is air and snow and space around me, but I am completely often unaware of anything that has a moment to the next moment to the next moment. There doesn't seem to be that until maybe I'm at the end of a very long run, and now that has ended. So there was a time where, again, our lifestyle, other than having to get food, go out when the animal was roaming and bring back food, or make sure that the light was there so that it was daytime. But even the distinction between daytime and nighttime, this all furthered, again, just the evolution, the development of what we'll call mankind. We know that our environment is suffering greatly based on the evolution of mankind and all that is required to sustain our interests and our perceptions. So, we're partnering in part with the evolution of the species, and at the same time, we're, I think, collectively craving the loss of that freedom, of that now here, nowhere, on a very physical level, on an environmental level, on a cognitive level. So hopefully Reconnected Healing, hopefully a little bit of what we get to experience in that exchange is a bit of the relief.
Allows us to experience it really for more sustained periods. It's not that we haven't found multiple ways to touch on it before, some that we refer to as being in the zone of something, being in the zen of something, touching in, coming out. But what I really love about Reconnective Healing is that we can enter into that space and really be in it for sustained periods of time as we just allow our presence to be there without
the competition.
Right, without the competition, without the judgment, without anything, just a simple state of being. It's as if what we identify as ourselves individually disappears.
So what's the happy medium for sustaining life and progress and the continuation of the human experience? It's all very interesting right now. And maybe part of what artificial intelligence, virtual reality is here to do is to give us the contrast.
Give us the contrast.
Give us the contrast. It certainly has eased up certain things. Obviously, the obligation of something that may have taken 7, 8, 9 hours to do, clearly it can do much quicker. And so the question is, what do we do with our freedom? What do we do with our timelessness? How do we apply the space where timelessness can be a choice for us in any given day or night? What is it that we choose to do with that available flow, that available timelessness?
And can we live in those frequencies, but not, as I heard someone say recently, bliss out?
Right.
Can we be in those frequencies and still be very present and functional, yet at a different level where AI maybe might become supportive, but not become the takeover?
Yeah,
that's exploring it.
Sorry. Go on, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, we would love you to interrupt us now.
We could just
interrupt us.
we could just please interrupt us.
Yes. You know what they say about interrupt us.
I bet you're gonna tell us in a second. I am so sorry because unfortunately and ironically we're running out of time.
Hey Anna.
But not space.
But not space.
Let's definitely point out though, and we're right there, just another 6 weeks or so away. Costa Rica is going to be the first
timeless, truly timeless experience.
I think it's the exploration of when we bring this that we're talking about here today into an environment that allows us to explore these ideas. That's the platform and that's the playground for this week together. And obviously, Anna, you will be an integral part of that week with us. She's the co-creator of that week with us.
Right. Anna will be there with us. And also, this is a very unique, different kind of experience for us because we won't be so much teaching reconnective healing as we may be exploring some of the concepts and philosophies, your own questions, our own personal space together. Some of the people coming will be reconnective healing practitioners. Others may be friends or spouses who have not experienced it yet.
That know nothing about it. And I think that blending is going to allow for this intelligence to really present what perhaps has been the invisible and make it visible. And I'm encouraged by that. So check that out too.
Absolutely. Costa Rica is happening, guys. And there's a link that I'll put in the description below. And there's going to be many more announcements regarding 2020. The Reconnective Healing and the Reconnection is expanding. We heard Dr. Shima. We've heard Rob. We've heard our entire team and everybody who's been here through the jam. And you can catch on our YouTube channel. We want to talk about this timelessness, these experiences that we have in Reconnective Healing, and we want to be loud about it. And we want to invite you, right? Now that the three of us are right here, send in your stories. Take up a camera, record them, send them to us. Let's share them with the world. Guys, the holidays are here. Any last comments or wishes?
Yeah, we are really wishing everyone a certain level of peace, clarity, and certainty amidst all the chaos that is within our control and outside of our control. And we know that when you receive and allow these frequencies to take you where they know to go, there is that relief, there is that receivership, and the more and more you are able to recognize it, we think the more unfolds. So we wish you that unfolding. We wish you that greater capacity to receive, so that it may continue to reveal more scales of awareness and perception.
You might even recognize you're at the North Pole during Christmas, where there are no return lines. No, but many happy returns.
So we wish everyone a beautiful holiday. Thank you, Anna, for the creation of the RH Jam and this platform to be able to share together.
Yes, absolutely. It's a gift. It's a gift. And Anna, you are too.
Yes, you are. We'll see you all in 2020.
Yes, we will.
2020 it is, guys. Thank you again for being on the RH Jam. And we'll have you back in 2020. Until then,
okay.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Looking forward to it.
Well, what can I say? That was a true treat for today. And I want to encourage you to visit our links. I put more information about Costa Rica. I put the link I spoke about before about Alan Lightman's book, Einstein's Dreams. And there's also so many other links that I encourage you to visit. I want to conclude today with 3 things that I hope can be takeaways for you about ways you can feel, sense, and stay in that timelessness. Once you touch it, you know it. It just sticks to you. So first, remember, we choose if we want to be in sequential time or if we want to know ourselves to be timeless. It's a choice. Sometimes we want to, shall we say, continue on with the timeline we're in, experience it, and then we choose to be bound to a clock turning around crazy like that clock that I showed you earlier. And there are times that you need to remember you can always step back, and in that stepping back, you find yourself that you are truly timeless. And in that timelessness, that's the true space of your essential, eternal self. And number 2, when we know ourselves to be everywhere, our experience of time moves from our minds, which is what keeps it sequential, A, B to C to D, to our instinct. And our instinct immediately tunes into everything and anything that is timeless. Once we allow it to move from our mind in the pursuit of sequential time, which is the clock turning around, to our instinct, which is timeless. Maybe it's because we spend so much time there and, Reconnective Healing and that timelessness that perhaps some of our cells become also a little bit timeless. That's another conversation, though. That's another conversation we're having in our next program about being multidimensional and perhaps moving through walls. Super cool. Coming up next week. And third, time is a measurement mechanism. Let's not forget about this. When we're talking about time and we're talking about scalar and scales and even dimensions, these are measurement mechanisms to establish a point of reference between where we are and the space and the world around us. So ultimately, when you think about this, it's all bound to our perception. Even dimensions are bound to our perception. It's just a way that via language and our experience, we're able to harness for ourselves the concept of something that is so much more, so much bigger than what we experience in our 4D reality. Alrighty, we're out of time. And today, I have to let you know, guys, that yes, the first hour of that portal is free. All you need to do is visit our link here and sign up and stick around, because not only am I putting more information about Costa Rica, but I have a very special code only for the holidays provided by the office where you can get for 74% off the whole portal online course. So keep watching because that code is coming up. Let me thank again Dr. Eric Pearl and Jillian Fleer and the entire Reconnection team. Until next week, this has been the RH Jam.